Hi, how's it going? My name is Alex, aka Fiber, and today I'm going to basically be doing the first video and a continuation of a lot of videos. I just accidentally hit my microphone, but you know what? It's whatever. Because the microphone quality is going to suck. My Ableton is probably going to skip around a ton because of CPU and because my MacBook likes to act weird. But it's whatever, because here, at the end of the day, I'm really just here to kind of like help you guys out with music production. I've had 7 years of experience, not to flex or anything, but I really do want to take this time to have like a free outlet for people so that I can kind of showcase what I've learned in terms of mixing, mastering, composition, and sampling in the hopes of, helping you become a little bit of a better producer. There's actually not really a dedicated French house account or disco house, future funk, whatever you want to call it. There's not really an account that's dedicated to those production practices. So hopefully I can kind of take what I've learned over the past few years and put it out. And there will definitely be, other tutorials, other remakes to come. But let's just get right into it. Today we're going to be remaking Daft Punk's High Fidelity. Daft Punk's High Fidelity is a song that is on Homework, their first debut album. And this song is especially special because it samples Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are, a classic, timeless 1971 piece, or 1979. I don't know why I just said 71, but let's pretend that I didn't say that. So, basically, I'm going to be running down the remake that I did of it, and just to mention this because it'll make it a little bit easier for me in case, there's like any copyright claims. I am doing this for educational purposes only. In the event that you do hear actual High Fidelity, I'm just going to be playing very small sections of the original so that you can compare it to the remake. But everything else that you see is remade from Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are, and it is strictly for educational purposes, just so I can kind of give a comprehensive overview of how the song was made. So let's get right into it. I'm going to play this section right here. There's a little bit more that I was working on, but this is kind of like a work in progress. I haven't had the time to really find most of the samples in this section, so I'm going to be just looking at the one that's the most complete. Production-wise, it's not very complex. It's really just like mostly 909s and some 707 percussion, just one 707 kick drum with some effects slathered on top of it, but it's the sampling that really makes this song glow. So, let's get started, and let's just listen to it. If it stutters, whatever, I don't care anymore, because this is like my 15th take. So, here you go. So yeah, that's basically about it. God, that stutter was horrible, but you know what? We're going to make the best out of it. I also want to say I apologize for my bad microphone quality and bad processor, apparently. Processor, they unfortunately can't even manage to screen record just audio samples. There's not even any MIDI that I put into here. But hey, it is what it is. We'll make it work. So, I do want to kind of like talk about this section right here, which is just the beginning section. I'm going to loop this really quick. I don't know why it's acting up even on the loops, but hey, it's whatever. So this section is predominantly based of a couple of samples and a couple of very small micro samples, literally about, if I could approximate, about 20 milliseconds long for those little like vocal hiccups, and then samples that basically come from a large variety of sections from Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are. There's also a 909 snare that plays on top of it. And if we compare that to the original, and this is a remake. So let's just go right over here and look at this section right here without any sort of sidechain, and let's just start deconstructing it. So this is the section that I managed to do, and this is just again without any sort of sidechain. So let's just talk about this little vocal section. It sounds really wide compared to the rest of the samples, and you would be right to say that. So these are the little vocal samples. I do also want to say, because I forgot to mention it at the beginning of the video, thanks a lot to RobClemz. He actually started this remake, but I ended up deleting about like 90% of it and like trying to remake it myself. There are some little chains that he had here that I kept, and even though it's a mess in the chain department, the sampling is really what matters. So this vocal sample section right here is basically just from this section of Billy Joel's Just the Way You Are. I'll just go ahead and I'll play it really quick. You're too familiar. Let me just stretch that out. You're too familiar. It's right here. And we can just look at that section just generally about right there and play it. A little bit shorter. There it is. So then afterwards, that sample was basically put in a section where a little bit of ping pong delay can be added and also some reverb. On this one, I have a ping pong delay on most of the frequency spectrum field, which is just basically, if you imagine like an EQ, that entire field from like, what is it, like 30 hertz to like 10K, 20K, whatever it is at the end of it. So lowest to highest. And basically I'm doing a ping pong delay that is incredibly short. I set the time to about 40 milliseconds, or exactly 40 milliseconds as it states right there, and then put the dry wet incredibly low. Didn't really add too much feedback, so that when you add this, where it's kind of like a ping pong delay, kind of a, you know, covering most of the frequency spectrum except for the bass, even though there's not really much of bass there, and then reverb in kind of like the low mids, pretty short decay time. You know, I have the pre-delay set to default as it is when you open up Ableton, and then about 50-50 on the dry wet. You get this. That wasn't the right one. So you get that ping pong delay, but then you have the added bonus of getting a little bit of a reverb effect. It just basically makes the sample a little bit more wider, and this is also the same case with this sample right here. It's basically from this section right here. And you can basically find it in this section right here. If we play it really shortly, it's basically this section right here. If we look at the waveform, we can kind of see the amplitude raise. It's basically that section right there. And it's also actually pitched down about half a semitone. So I have it pitched down about negative 40 cents right here. So then when you put it in this section right here, also notice that with this sample right here, it's actually not matched exactly to grid. And I noticed that this was the case for the majority of High Fidelity, as if we go back and listen to the original actually, because I have it right here queued up. If we match it to like a metronome, so as you can generally see here, it's actually matching up pretty decently to the metronome. So we're at 126 BPM. However, you know, we could warp this maybe a little bit. So we have like the snare hitting on 2 and 4. However, you can see that there's a lot of that sample material that's kind of swung all about kind of wildly. It's not actually matched to grid, and there's a couple of reasons why. First off, Daft Punk didn't make homework with a DAW. They used a variety of drum machines and a shit ton of sequencers, and used just one main sampler for all of it. And generally, when you do that, you're recording it by basically playing on pads. So there's not the same level of quantization. I know how to pronounce this, but I'm very tired. There's not the amount of quantizing that you would have, or there's no quantizing at all on a sampling pad like that, basically just like an analog sampler with maybe 12-bit samples in it. You have to play it basically as if you were playing an instrument. And with that, humans, they don't really have exact 4 on the floor, 1, 2, 3, 4 rhythm. So that's partially the reason why it's so wildly swung like this, but it's also because I think Daft Punk was trying to give it an actual legitimate swing to it. So on top of the human error aspect of things, kind of in the same way that Jay Dilla would play drums on, his MPC, if you guys have seen that Vox video, I'm sure everyone has. That's basically what Daft Punk was doing as well. They played it as if it was an instrument in the most legitimate of ways, by swinging the samples that could have been just 4 on the floor. And that's what gives it kind of that groove. And let's just go back to the remade version. Whoa. There you go. So we have the first 2 vocal samples, and let's just run down these samples right here. We just turn this off. This is the first sample. So when that's cut up, that is played like this. The second sample is this. And that sample can be found right here. Gotta turn these off. Gotta remember to turn these off. That's that sample right there. Play it over. So far we have 2 samples. So we have... Now, this is kind of a complex part. This one kind of took a while to figure out because it's 3 really fast samples played almost at the same time. The first sample can actually be found in this section of the song. Let me go ahead and look at that real quick. So it's the section where it's don't go trying some new fashion. That little at the end of it is basically the sample we're looking for. And when you go back, that's how it should sound. So that's the 3rd sample. So far we have. Now, this sample right here is kind of weird because it's very small and probably just about everyone would miss it. Let's just go back to this really quick. Just that little hit right there. So when that's basically put into there, we get these 4 samples. I swear, I'm not turning on the metronome. It's weird. Now this is the next sample right here. Let's pull this out and figure out where that sample would be. Change the color of your hair. There it is. So then you have all of these. And then the last sample is actually in the beginning of the song, where you can find it sounding like this. When you put it all together, it sounds like this with the vocals as well. With a 909 snare on top of it, you basically get this. There's no 909. Where is it? Now let's move on to the other section, which is actually this part right here. Okay, so just to kind of talk about what's going on here. There is a 909 kick, very obvious. That's just basically the standard kick in all of the Homework songs. And don't be fooled by these mastering add sustain compressors. I don't actually know why this is here. But these compressors and this enhance section right here is probably just to boost the high end a little bit. This is literally just a 909 kick with the low end at about 170 Hertz, just kind of like boosted. That's really about it. It's being boosted about 5 decibels. In my remake, I'm actually sidechaining. So what, if you guys don't know what sidechaining is, it's actually just using volume automation, in time or whenever, a specific set of the percussion, like the kick or the snare hits. That volume automation ducks the audio so that it makes room and gives us this pumpy, airy effect that a lot of house songs have. However, when this song was being made, there wasn't really, I guess sidechain existed, but it was much harder to create. And Daft Punk were a very big fan of the Alesis 3630, even though it was a quite cheap compressor, and they definitely could have used something better. They really like the sound of it when they basically used it as a brick wall limiter. So generally what Daft Punk would do is they would take a 909 kick that was just being sequenced from their 909 and literally find the main kind of like point where like the lowest fundamental essentially where that kick was playing, and then boost it literally like anywhere between 5 to 10 decibels to the point where it was basically clipping. But right now it's not really distorting too hard because we have a limiter on it. But basically it'd be to the point where it was hard redlining. And what they would do is they would bring it down by literally using the 3630 as a brick wall limiter, so that it would level the sound of that bass and basically create that sidechain effect without actually even creating the sidechain. It's something that, if you have any sort of like standard decent compressor, even if it's a software one, it doesn't matter what DAW it is, you can definitely do this. However, since sidechain is so prevalent, a lot of people just end up using that. I do know some people that kind of use this trick though, and I've used it in a couple of remakes, like My Music Sounds Better With You remake, that I may or may not do a video on. But generally what we're looking at here is just a regular 909 pattern with one 707 kick. It's either a 707 or a Lin, but I'm almost convinced that it's a 707. So we have basically a very similar, just 4 on the floor beat, with the exception of this 707 16th thing going on. So we have, your 909 kick, your snare, which sounds like this, just a regular 909 snare. What I did is actually just bring down that little fundamental at like 155 Hertz. So it doesn't sound like really powerful. It sounds kind of like lower in the mix, because 909 snares do have the tendency to just sound really, really powerful to the point of excessiveness. There's a just a 909 clap right there when it's mixed in with the snare. And I do actually have LFO tool on this. I'm basically sidechaining it because in the original you can actually hear that the snare's little transient actually has more prevalence over the clap. So what I'm assuming was done was that the tail of the snare was replaced, you know, for the tail, not the tail, but rather the transient of the clap. The transient of the clap isn't really there, but it's more kind of like the snare, and you just get the tail of it playing rather than the entire thing. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, but it's not one-to-one. And then there's like this 909 rise. And, you know, I just I took that little frequency out there as much as I possibly could, added a little bit of reverb, and then basically just rose it up. I just basically took this rise, clicked on it, hit the reverse button right here, and then we have a nice little reverse after it, you know, continues to render. You know, and that's basically how you achieve that effect if you don't know. And then just a regular 909 hi-hat. Actually, don't know why this isn't a high pass, but generally what you would do is you would high pass unnecessary frequencies just to keep your mix a little bit cleaner. And here's the piece de resistance. I don't know French. Basically, this is just a 707 kick, right? So without all of the EQ and everything, it just sounds like this. But what they did is they did a little bit of high pass, took a lot of the clickiness out of it, added the same ping pong and reverb that you would generally get on that little, yeah, that stupid little thing. And then just did a little bit of light compression. This is a chain that I typically use, but I took most of everything out of there, just to make it look a little bit less stupid. So yeah, and this is basically just playing on the 16th note. So when you play it with the kick drum and literally everything at the same time, it sounds like this. Let's compare that to the original. It's not exact. There's definitely more reverb in mine. There's definitely some frequency stuff going on in mine that isn't identical to this. But at the end of the day, it's about the same thing. So that's generally how they did it. Okay, and then there's this section right here. So yeah, this is the last section, and I do actually have it right here. So let me just solo this. So this is the first sample, and we're just going to extend it really quick, figure out where that sample is being played. So it's in the part where it's like, I would not leave you. Take that out. Okay, this is the second sample. Let's just extend this, figure out where that sample would be. I took the good times. I'll take the bad times. Cool. There's that sample. So we have so far. This is the third sample. This one was pretty hard for me to find. It took a while to find it. Let's play that one more time. Same section with like I would not leave you. Okay, so with the whole thing in mind, it sounds like this. This is a really small sample, this sample right here. That's just a little bit of a small section. Could have come this far. Boom. Alright. And we can notice how this sounds without this sample right here, that little small sample at the end. This basically just gives it a little bit more room. It kind of makes it kind of sound a little bit more natural. Kind of sounds like there's a little bit more background noise going on in the background. What is this? The fifth sample sounds like this. I definitely note that this is from the section where it's like, just the way you are. Yep, definitely. Yep, that's where it is. That's how you play it. Actually, I was wrong. That's not the sample. This is not the sample, but rather it's just right next to it, playing just a little bit before it. So yeah, when you play that all together, it sounds like this. And then there's 2 more samples to go. So this is the 6th or whatever sample. And this can be found in this section. Times of trouble. We never. I hope that's it. Yep, there it is. So all together. And the last sample. This one's probably the longest one in this little breakdown. Yep, and it's the final product. You might actually be noticing though, however, because this is the last thing that I actually want to mention, is that the processing on the breakdown one definitely sounds a little bit different than the actual remake, and there's a reason for this. First off, the main one has a little bit of the mids lowered, and this is actually just being played in straight mono. This section right here is literally 0% width. If you have like a stereo widening plugin, Ableton has utility as one of the stock Ableton plugins where you can do this. Where it's the section right here where it says width, and I just brought it down to 0. If you brought it up to 200%, you would be getting only the mid signal as opposed to the side signal. I hope I'm getting my terminology right. Let me just double check. Yes. So, no, I got it wrong actually. The side signal is generally what you consider it to be like the stereo signal, while the mid signal is basically just the mono center audio. I'm really tired. Also, it's 8:10 p.m. So, basically what is happening here is this is playing entirely mono, and there is a section essentially where the exact same sample breakdown is playing. However, this one is being affected by the same reverb and ping pong delay that our stupid little friend Mr. is doing as well. Yep. So that's basically happening right here as well, where this is playing in mono, and this one is playing like kind of not in mono. It's like at 23% width, so it's still pretty mono, but then there's reverb and ping pong delay happening at the same time, which makes it sound like this. And I also managed to just go ahead and high pass that at around 600 Hertz, because I noticed that like getting some of more of those like low mids in there wouldn't be really much of a point. It sounded exactly the same. Instead, adding the low mids would just kind of muddy up the mix. So playing the mono, the completely mono, just center panned audio signal with this sort of mono reverbed ping pong delayed signal makes it sound like this. And essentially what we're doing here is just emulating a wider stereo field, where probably Daft Punk were saying like, oh, this sounds really good in mono. However, I don't really like, like some of like the side audio going on. I like it, pan center, but we still need a little bit of width. So basically what they were essentially doing with High Fidelity is emulating that width using delay, flanger, reverb effects, which basically really tremendously, there's a tremendous difference in the way that the actual audio sounds at the end of the day. And if we compare this to the original, we actually just take a utility and bring the width down all the way to 0. So we're getting only the middle audio as opposed to hearing none of the side audio. There's still some of that like ping pong delay that's going on, but it's definitely not as prevalent. And when we put it up all the way to 200, this may or may not work considering on how YouTube's compression is, because I found that when I only play side audio and something like SoundCloud, it disappears. So let's see if we hear absolute silence or if we actually hear something. You might actually need headphones or studio monitors for this. Fair warning. So right now we're just playing the side signal, and we can hear a lot of those like delay effects going on. So there's definitely still like side audio kind of playing, even though there's more mid audio, center panned audio than side audio, which is like everywhere. And that's supposed to give the illusion of audio depth. So it's the mid and the side audio that's really working together. I didn't really expect this to become a stereo feel tutorial, but it's basically what it's coming down to because a lot of the processing heavily relies on it. And then, there's the standard equalization, EQ, I don't know why I just called EQ equalization, and, just standard compression, which they probably just did by just ramming the bus with the 3630. On my version, I just have a little bit of multi-band compression, a little bit, it's actually at 100%. And there's also, like isotope ozone, which is actually a pretty nice product for what you get, where I'm doing a little bit of dynamic compression and also limiting it a ton. Oh, I'm playing the original, whoops. And we're basically getting about like -10 RMS, which is around what the original would have been, but this one is also very highly limited. Yeah, loudness wars. So that was my horrible remake of High Fidelity. Maybe the remake wasn't as horrible, but my explanation sure was. So if you really like it, just go ahead and like it, subscribe it. I don't know how this YouTube thing works, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.